Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third town hall. This one is on recovery, resources, and resiliency, and I'm happy to have three presenters here today. Just quick ground rules. You'll start on mute, but make sure you keep your microphones muted throughout. Type your questions into the questions or chat box, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the webcast. And then we will also be doing a Q&A at the end. This meeting is being recorded and we will post it online towards the end of today or tomorrow. Our website is apacolorado.org. We have some resources there that we've been compiling throughout this whole pandemic. So if you want to, you can go there and see some of that information, including tools for webcasts, links to our state government pages. The other thing I want to talk about is the MPC 20. The in-person meeting in Houston was canceled, but now we are doing MPC 20 at home. It's April 29th through May 1st. It's a low cost of $125. It's a 3-day online conference, but you don't have to watch all of them in one day. You can view the webinars and sessions over a year. So if you did register for MPC 20, your registration costs will or can be converted to registration for the MPC 20. AICP, the May exam has been rescheduled to summer 2020. There is no specific dates yet, but more information should be coming. For those who haven't heard this, the grace period for 18-19 was extended 1 month to May 29th, so you still have time to get all your CM credits. There are a lot of free online webcasts and on-demand videos. We even have ethics and law available on demand for free through the Planning webcast series. You can access that through the APA Colorado website. Be sure you're logged into the website to be able to see that calendar. Finally, the Colorado Planning Conference is still on. We know that it's a very fluid type thing, so we haven't notified all of our sessions that we've selected for the CM proposal part, but we hope to be doing that notification soon and know that it's kind of fluid. We don't really know what it's going to look like in September, October, whether we're going to be back to a normal, kind of the new normal, or what's going on, but we do still plan on holding the conference, and we will keep you updated if any of that changes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Sarah Davis.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this snowy, for those of you who have snow on the ground, Thursday morning. I'm really excited about the panel that we have today to talk about recovery, resources, and resiliency. But before I turn it over to them, I just wanted to do a brief introduction to something that's really personal to me. So about 13 years ago, I was a first-year planning graduate student at Virginia Tech. And on April 16th, our community was rocked by a school shooting that was heard around the world. And so this day is of particular importance to me and to my alma mater. And I think it's a good example of how out of tragedy, communities can be strengthened, and how important it is that even during this economic instability, that we as planners recognize the important strengths that those community bonds hold, and how we can rely on those as we work to get through this time and come out on the other side better. A year after the shooting, I graduated from graduate school and entered the workforce in 2008 at the height of the economic recession. And I lived in a resort community in Florida, and I saw how devastating economic instability and can have on a community that's built off of the backs of small businesses. And so it's a little bit interesting now to be here in 2020. I have my own consulting company, and at the beginning of March, hired my first full-time employee and moved into a co-working space in downtown Denver, only for about 2.5 weeks later for us to be sent home indefinitely. So I feel very personally interested in the topics that will be discussed today, and I'm excited that we have a robust set of speakers. And Sheila, you can just go to the next slide. I'll just do brief introductions. They're going to introduce themselves more fully, but we're joined today by Ann Miller, who is the director of the Colorado Resiliency Office at the Department of Local Affairs at the state level, as well as Ann Morgenthaler, who is the Assistant City Manager for the City of Montrose, and Darcy Perkins, who's the Assistant Director of ICE Lab, and will be sharing some of her economic development experience. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Ann Miller to give you a little bit more intro. Thank you guys so much again for today, and I look forward to the Q&A at the end.
Good morning, and thank you, Sarah. I'm going to give you some background first on the Colorado Resiliency Office, highlight our role in current recovery efforts, and end by sharing some thoughts about what communities can be doing now to start to navigate these uncharted waters that we find ourselves in. So Colorado is looked to as a national leader in resiliency efforts and has one of the few state resiliency offices in the country. The office was created after the historic 2013 floods to coordinate multiple agencies and resources to support hard-hit communities building back better. And the Colorado Resiliency Framework, a first of its kind, was adopted in 2015 to guide the state's efforts to be adaptive to changing conditions and disruptions. I'll pause to note that we're doing a 5-year update of the framework this year and kicking off the planning process with an online resiliency summit next week on April 21st. In 2018, with an amendment to the state's Disaster Emergency Act, CRO was created as a permanent office housed in the Department of Local Affairs. State agencies and communities are applying the lessons learned from the hard flood recovery efforts and are taking a proactive approach to community and economic recovery to the current COVID-19 crisis. Okay. The delay here. Please bear with me. Thank you. As defined in the Colorado statutes, resiliency is the ability of communities to rebound and positively adapt to or thrive amidst changing conditions or challenges. Very apt for the times that we're living in right now. And the resiliency framework takes a holistic systems approach with 6 interconnected sectors. And stakeholders from each of these sectors will be engaged in the resiliency framework update that I mentioned earlier. As outlined in the Colorado statutes, the Resiliency Office operates the state's resiliency and community recovery programs. We are a small but mighty team and accomplish a lot by bringing people together and leveraging resources to solve problems. We provide technical assistance to state agencies and communities. And last year, we piloted Colorado Resilient Community workshops and frameworks in Arvada, La Plata County, and Durango. We also support long-term recovery after disruptions like a natural disaster or our current unprecedented challenge. We are in beginning discussions to support the development of regional economic recovery and resiliency roadmaps to help chart a course for the future in this time of disruption in Colorado and across the globe. Okay, I thought this driving thing would be easy, and it's not. There. This FEMA graphic shows the national response and recovery frameworks. However, natural disasters are localized and this pandemic affects us all. While public health response efforts are working to save lives, which is the #1 priority, recovery efforts are needed to save livelihoods. CRO partners on recovery from day one and is in it for the long term. Last month, the Resiliency Office started convening multiple state agencies in weekly coordination calls to support community and economic recovery efforts. We're also bringing together voices from across the state in a Rural Economic Adaptations and Futures Committee we initiated to share ideas and local strategies. I was inspired by efforts that I've heard about in Montrose and in the Gunnison Valley that you'll hear from later in this town hall. In addition, we're working closely with local governments, and the state is holding weekly briefings and Q&A calls with local governments. We're working to understand the many impacts across the state to inform a coordinated strategic recovery plan. The DOLA Division of Local Government recently partnered to complete a COVID-19 local government impact survey to get a snapshot on financial impacts and issues. The resiliency framework includes these 9 resiliency criteria that are used as a lens to think holistically and maximize benefits. They can be applied to strengthen planning and capital projects on an ongoing basis, as well as the recovery efforts we find ourselves in now. As we look forward to community and economic recovery from the pandemic, we have the opportunity to address equity issues, apply adaptive and innovative solutions, build on our community visions and plans, and strive for lasting long-term impacts. The crisis has shone a light on systemic inequality. Right now, industries with the highest share of vulnerable jobs are accommodation, food service, and retail, and low-income workers are disproportionately affected. Addressing housing needs through rental assistance and eviction prevention is one example of action being taken by the state to address vulnerabilities, and I'm sure you have many more in your communities. As we strategize about what open for business looks like, and we know, we've heard the analogy, it's not a light switch where you turn it back on, more like a dimmer switch that over time. So as system thinkers, planners are well positioned to bring community stakeholders together to look at the opportunities to increase economic vitality, develop strong partnerships that build on our assets, and proactively plan for the future we want while being adaptive in a time of uncertainty. Thank you for your patience. One of the actions planners can take now is to form a recovery and resiliency team. This pandemic has impacted us all, so draw on the talents, perspectives, energy, and creativity of community members to accelerate solutions and foster an all hands on deck approach, and take a regional perspective as well. At the kickoff meeting, you can define roles, ground yourself in those visions and values of your region and community, build on existing goals, and start to map out different scenarios for moving to the new normal. With social distancing continuing in some form in the coming months, how your community is set up to succeed, thinking about broadband for teleworking and learning, how are businesses adapting to changes in consumer behavior, what do planners need to do differently to adapt to these shifts, such as online permitting, zoning changes to accommodate more curbside pickup perhaps, more outdoor restaurant seating, etc. Scenario planning has never been more relevant. What does transition to open look like under different scenarios? What are the issues and opportunities and strategies that emerge out of each scenario? For example, in a scenario of social distancing measures loosening gradually in the coming months, we know that people will continue to be wary of being in public spaces and that tourism will be impacted in the short term. But that if we capitalize on the spirit of innovation and adaptation, we'll be more united and find solutions. Strategies could include public health and businesses partnering to put in place safety protocols and align efforts through strong communication and partnerships. You'll hear more about this later. This disruption could be used as an opportunity to think about economic diversification, especially for communities largely reliant on tourism. Across Colorado, these conversations are underway. Yesterday, I learned about a reopen committee that met earlier this week in La Plata County to strategize about how to open up more businesses faster with lower infection rates and accelerate economic opportunity in the long run. Next, we'll hear from 2 communities who will share their efforts to bring together their communities to address these challenges and seek solutions. Ann Morgan Thaler, the Assistant City Manager of the City of Montrose, will start us off, and then Darcy Perkins from the ICE Lab in Gunnison County will follow. So please visit our webpage where you can find resources and learn how you can provide input into the Colorado Resiliency Framework, and email me if you're interested in joining the Resiliency Summit on April 21st. I'll turn it over to Ann now.
Thank you, Anne. I'm Anne Morgenthaler, the Assistant City Manager with the City of Montrose, and I'm really happy to join everyone today. It looks like we have over 157 attendees, which is so excellent. And I'm going to share a little bit about what we're doing in Montrose right now. And I know that we are all learning and changing and observing as we go. And so I hope it's helpful to hear a little bit about what's happening on the Western Slope and what we're seeing and trying to do to help our community right now. And like Ann Miller said, getting stakeholders together and working together. Okay. And thanks for bearing with me as I try to move these slides forward. Oops. Okay, so this is where we're located. Some of you may not have been to Montrose, but if you came to the APA conference a few years ago, you went to Telluride and you probably drove through Montrose. We're on the Western Slope. We're about an hour and 15 minutes away from Gunnison, our neighbor to the east, and Darcy will be talking about what's going on over in Gunnison County. And Montrose is a hub regionally for shopping, for healthcare, and also for employment. In Montrose, a lot of our workforce ends up doing construction in Telluride and in Ouray. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that's important or relevant during this COVID-19 crisis, but we're seeing a big impact right now in construction, and we're really focusing on that, which is pertinent for planners and people in the building professions as well. I think we've got about 1,500 people in Montrose who work in construction. It's one of our biggest sectors next to healthcare, retail, accommodation, and food. And so we've been paying attention to that through this crisis. Okay, so here's just a little bit of information about where we're at with this COVID-19 crisis on the West Slope. We're not seeing as many cases as on the Front Range, but for the West Slope, we've got a lot, and Gunnison County does as well. So we've been fortunate to get most of our tests back recently. We only have about 41 pending tests. This is the update from a few days ago. We have 65 cases, though of course we know there are more cases in Montrose, but I bring this up because it's been an interesting environment. There are varying perceptions about the magnitude of COVID-19 here. And some people in our community are questioning whether these shutdowns are necessary. Some people think that the state hasn't gone far enough. And so that is an environment that can be challenging for those of us who are right in the middle of it, assisting businesses, answering questions for community members. And I would guess that in your communities, you're seeing some of the same things to varying degrees. Let's see. Okay. So what are we doing in Montrose? We're trying to adapt. So we don't have any restrictions on gathering or on businesses beyond what the governor of Colorado has put in place, although our neighboring county, San Miguel County, does. So San Miguel County is not allowing any construction right now. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of our workforce in Montrose who commutes over to Telluride in order to do construction. So that's been a big hit for us. But we don't have any additional restrictions. And so when all of the stay-at-home orders and the related orders affecting food, restaurants, takeout came into place, we had to act pretty quickly. But we are continuing to provide city services at the City of Montrose. So we closed our city hall first to most public interaction before the stay-at-home order. That was in place for about a week. And then all of our workers began working from home, all of our staff, except for those essential services like trash and recycling and some of our utilities crew and some of our parks maintenance crew members who need to be out and about. But that includes building and planning. So we shifted to working from home, and we continued to issue building permits, and we continued to do building inspections. And I saw one question about how we're doing that. And so I thought I'd go a little bit into it, and I'm interested to know also what other communities are doing. But for us, it meant that we had to rely more on those electronic processes that we'd been thinking about doing and meaning to implement, but never fully implemented. We use a system called Llama to track our building permit process, and we hadn't fully used it, but suddenly we needed to. So we're using that now, and we're finding that our contractors are really loving it. They're getting updates about their inspections immediately through the Llama system. They get this email on their phones right away about the status of their inspection, and they like that. We're issuing permits electronically, and we're also reviewing plans electronically from home. And our building inspector is noticing that we need some additional software in order to do that better. So we'll be making those changes. But I was just talking with our building inspector today, and he was saying, we're not going backwards. He really likes these changes that we've made. We had to make them quickly as a result of this crisis, but we've gained efficiencies as a result, and he likes it, and our contractors like it too. So that's really been an opportunity for us that we'll be using with us as we move forward. We have been busy in Montrose in terms of building and planning. So last year, during the same 4-week period that we've been closed, we had 7 permits for new houses, new residential construction. This year, during that same 4 weeks, while we have been working from home under the stay-at-home order, we've had 19 permits, so almost 3 times as many, and we've been able to do that while working remotely. We know, like I said, that construction is really important here, and so we're trying to keep those folks moving along, make sure that people have those jobs. We know other people have lost jobs because construction is not happening in San Miguel County, so that's part of our resiliency plan. We also are taking the opportunity when we issue building permits to share information about COVID-19. So we're giving contractors safety information and asking them to print it and put it on their job sites. So it's a way that we can continue to engage with the public as well. We're communicating and listening in those ways, and in other ways too. We found that that's just really important right now as a local government. On this slide are some of the things that we've been putting out on social media, just to tell people what's going on. Everyone is tied to their phones right now looking for updates, so it's a really good time to be sharing information. People are hungry for it. We put all of our information on our website, cityofmontrose.org/COVID-19, and you can find some of the information that we put out about our building and planning processes there. And I'll just say thanks to, I think the city of Denver, I got an email from them after they closed their offices explaining what their building and planning processes were. And it made me think, wow, we should be doing that too. So we sent out a newsletter to our contractors that was very well received and initiated a lot of conversations. So I would recommend doing that too. We're relying on our relationships in the community, and we're taking on new roles. I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, but we had built relationships with partners in the community, with nonprofits and with businesses that have proved to be vitally important now. And so I think that you've got those as well. And I just would say that for us, it's been beneficial to sit down and think about not only who the obvious stakeholders are, but just what are the other organizations that you've worked with in the past and how can they help your community right now? We've been inventorying our resources, our financial resources, our human resources, and using them sometimes in different ways. And I think that adapting, moving quickly, continuing to support our community is laying the foundation for some credibility here in Montrose. Even at first, though people questioned, why is everything shutting down? It seems like this isn't such a big deal. It's just the flu. Now, as this progresses, I think people are seeing that we were actually doing a good thing for our community and laying the foundation for helping for the long term. So I would say that we're just going to try and continue to respond quickly and help our community along the way. And I'm going to go to the next slide here and give you an example of one thing that we're doing. So this isn't planning related, it's not business related, but it is community related, and it's a way that we've helped some of our vulnerable community members. So I think probably the same in your areas, but the school district continues to provide meals for students. And this is so important that kids are still able to get that meal a day. And actually in our area, it's 2 meals a day. It's a breakfast and a lunch every day, Monday through Friday. And in the Montrose School District, they're providing those meals at pickup locations, but they weren't offering delivery. And during this time, we're telling people to stay home, but then people might need to come out once a day in order to get these meals. And so there was a conversation in our community about who is going to provide delivery. And at the city, we decided, even though that's not our typical role, that it was really important and it needed to happen. And so we started coordinating partners. So we hosted a sign-up forum on our website for delivery. As I showed earlier, we've got a great social media following, and we put out lots of information on social media. So we started pumping information about that. We have a really good relationship with our recreation district. They similarly are not typically in the business of delivering meals, but they jumped right on it because they have staff that they want to put to work. They have buses and vehicles. They're organized and they love our community. And so, and they were closed because the rec center had to close. And so they started delivering these meals to students. Shepherd's Hand is a nonprofit in town, and they usually deliver a food box once a month to families who need it. And we asked them, based on some of our observations from the rec district as they were delivering meals and our knowledge about the impacts of COVID-19, we knew some people were experiencing food insecurity. The city asked Shepherd's Hand if they would be willing to donate additional meal boxes to the families who are receiving meal delivery, and they said, of course. So they gave us over 150 meal boxes to deliver to community members with those school district meals, which was excellent, provided additional resources on top of what the school district was doing. The Boys and Girls Club, we have an excellent relationship with the Boys and Girls Club. They started delivering these weekend food backpacks. They don't usually do that, but we were able to call on them, and they turned on a dime because we have a good relationship together and have worked together in the past. So they're delivering these weekend backpacks. And then Jimmy John's heard what was going on, contacted the city and offered over 100 weekend meals for delivery to kids in addition. The County Emergency Operations Center is providing COVID-19 information in Spanish and in English that we've included with all of the meals for pickup and delivery. And the city's coordinating all of these entities. So to me, this feels like something, we're proud of this because we've been able to really quickly, that all happened almost in the first week. Jimmy John's came on in the second week, really turning this around, using our partnerships and working a little bit differently and using different roles in order to achieve something good for our community. Going to the next slide here. Another way that we've adapted and we're transitioning to business recovery is in these 3 ways. This is our current small business relief package. And I think that even if you don't have any resources, financial resources in your community to assist businesses, there's still a lot that we can be doing right now in terms of communicating and asking businesses what they're going through so that we can look out for the opportunities when they become available, even if the city or your county isn't the resource, isn't going to be providing those financial resources. And I just mentioned that Downtown Colorado Inc. and the Main Street America program are both really good resources right now. They've been sharing a lot of information about how to help your Main Street businesses. But in Montrose, here's what we're doing. We're doing a small business emergency loan fund. And this is an example of us looking internally at our plans and changing them in response to COVID-19. A story for another time is that last year, the city of Montrose dissolved our Downtown Development Authority, but we had those funds from the Downtown Development Authority sitting. We didn't know what we were going to do with them. And right now, we decided to use those funds to offer 0% interest loans to our small business community. So it was not intentionally what that funding was meant to be used for, but we're using it right now in order to help businesses. We're doing sales tax deferral. I know a lot of other communities are doing that too. And then another example is of us shifting resources in order to partner with the private sector is these cooperative marketing grants that we're offering. We had budgeted for our 2020 budget some money to do marketing for tourism. And as Ann Miller mentioned, we know tourism is going to be affected. We think that's beyond our control, how people are going to be traveling or not traveling. And so instead of using that money that we are going to use to try and attract tourists to our community, we're going to use it to support businesses. And we think that that will also potentially support tourism too. But we're doing these cooperative marketing grants, and you'll notice that 3 businesses need to work together in order to get that $1,000 marketing grant. And so we think that that also has the side effect of getting those businesses to work together and build capacity in our community, in addition to the city working with those businesses. And finally, challenges and opportunities. I think we're all finding that one of the biggest challenges right now, and as we move forward, is balancing this idea of having our economy and our community be open. And we've been using this hashtag Montrose is open, even though we've been staying at home, and those public health priorities. So how do we balance that moving forward? I feel like we are constantly right now moving back and forth between those two things. You know, we're promoting people going to restaurants to get takeout and delivery, and we are simultaneously promoting staying at home in order to protect the health of our community. And I think that that really challenging balance will continue. This changing reality and the varying perceptions of our reality has been so hard, and I think will continue to be hard. But it's also an opportunity for us to talk with community members about it and do what we do as planners, which is meet them where they are. They'll continue to have different perspectives about the severity of this. And I think that the support that we offer might depend on that. But also, as Ann Miller was mentioning, I think we do have a role to try and communicate good information to people and try and bring them forward. An example of that for us was just before the restaurants stopped being allowed to have gatherings in the restaurants. We actually were meeting in Montrose with a member of the Resiliency office. And we were at a coffee shop as one of our just best business owners in town. And we took the opportunity that day to sit down with him and say, how are you planning for this? What do you think is going to happen? And he said, I think everything's going to stay the same. We're just going to keep sanitizing our tables and offering good service, and we're not worried about it. And it was, I think, 3 days later that they had to close to the public and only do delivery and takeout services. And so it just was an example of how things can change in ways that businesses are just really not anticipating, and how we can help them through it. And we're able to then start advertising for them and advertising all the businesses that are doing takeout in our community. Continuing to build relationships and engage is very important. And as I mentioned, making overdue changes and finding new and better ways. So our building department, we made good changes as a result of this, and we're not going backwards. We're seeing our farmers market locally asking for our assistance in building an online platform so that they can deliver boxed veggies to residences. This is something they've been thinking about and never did, and now they're moving in that direction, and it'll actually expand the services that they have been offering at the in-person farmers market. And I think that putting our skills as planners and our training to use is really important. Looking in our budgets at municipalities and understanding what priorities we need to tend to this year and what things can wait. And also, like Ann said, bringing stakeholders together is really important. I just show here some of the things that we're doing to continue engagement, but now online. We have a mural project that we're continuing with because we think it's still really important to our community, and also more people are using that trail now more than ever. So we're voting on Facebook and we're voting electronically instead of having the cool in-person meetings we're gonna have. And then the Black Canyon Golf Course is still open here in Montrose, and that ad to me is an example of the balance. We're open, but please play safe. So I think we'll continue to do that as we move forward. And now I'm going to shift to Darcy Perkins and Ice Lab, our neighbor, who we haven't gotten to work with during this pandemic, but I'm sure we will be working together, Montrose and over in Gunnison County as this continues. So Darcy.
Thanks, Anne. And absolutely, I want to thank Anne because both Montrose and Grand Junction have saved lives of members of Gunnison County. If we were not able to export residents that were needing respirators to Montrose, to Grand Junction, to the Springs, it's estimated we may have had 7 losses of life because of our hospital not having all of the capacity that it would need during the height. So Montrose has been an incredible partner already, and I thank you for that. My name is Darcy Perkins. I work for the County of Gunnison through the Tourism and Prosperity Partnership. The Tourism and Prosperity Partnership came out of a planning process. I'm putting a link in the chat. This link explains what the One Valley Prosperity Project was. It was a planning process that happened several years ago. It converted the Tourism Association into Tourism and Prosperity Partnership, which redefined its mission to be not just tourism marketing for the Valley, but also economic development. And at the same time, the ICE Lab at Western, a co-working space and entrepreneurial hub that was created through a grant that Western received, was being let go of the university. They didn't want to manage it anymore. So the Tourism and Prosperity Partnership took on the ICE Lab and has been managing it now for almost a year. ICE stands for Innovation, Creativity, and Entrepreneurship. And prior to COVID, myself and the director, David Assad, were working in multiple ways to bring more economic diversity to the county, offer high-speed internet to small businesses, co-working space, office space, incubator, and accelerator programs. COVID has changed what we do dramatically, and what I'm going to share with you today, and hopefully my screen, there it goes. What I'm here to share is an infrastructure that's been successful in the urgent or early phase of the COVID emergency. Yesterday, in a meeting with county officials, it was voted that this structure will now also lead the stabilizing phase, or what would be considered the intermediate phase of planning, and then ultimately the recovery phase, which I believe you would consider the long-term planning. The infrastructure I'm sharing is brand new. It was set up overnight. And is nothing novel. So the concepts behind this is not new. It's not magical. In fact, this principle of bottom-up hierarchy is already in practice in the startup communities. And I think because of the work at the ICE Lab, working with entrepreneurs, this came natural to us, but it wasn't natural to necessarily our county. The other thing that's remarkable about what has happened in the last 5 weeks is we have very, very independent municipalities. We have the town of Mount Crested Butte, the town of Crested Butte, the city of Gunnison, the town of Almont, being the 4 Gunnison Valley municipalities. But we also have other towns in the county, and each one is remarkably independent. And so what is remarkable is that this infrastructure was created overnight. It brings everyone under one roof, and we have everyone's attention. So as of today, 785 businesses in Gunnison County self-subscribe to engage with this process, and 9 subgroups have been created. The technology we have engaged to make this happen is also brand new. and I think was instrumental, and without the technology, we wouldn't be here. So the way we are engaging the community right now is we have one weekly meeting with each subgroup on a Zoom call. We have created a Slack channel that the leaders of each subgroup are on with myself and some facilitators that help the leaders in the subgroups. We have created a web page for general business information, and then each subgroup has its own web page. And what we're doing is we're bridging communication between the businesses and an industry subgroup, the health director, and a task force. So leaders, a leader of the contractor subgroup said yesterday in a meeting, the way we're engaging community right now, while we need to be distancing, is beautiful. So the communication channels have been wide open. For example, early on, contractors were still able to work, but plumbing and electrical inspections had stopped from the state, not because they weren't allowed, but because there was miscommunication. That information was able to be communicated to our county officials, who then took that to the state, and within one day, we got those inspections started again. And that was an example of just being able to get information from the businesses to the elected officials who had the influence at the state level to make a positive change. The other thing that has been instrumental is every week there's been a new health order. We're on our 6th health order in the 6th week. And each health order has impacted these businesses in a different way. So for example, when the health order changed and required all contractors to now file for a waiver, and it had to include their subcontractors, we were able to get that information out to them in an email within minutes of that health order going out, and explaining to them what they needed to do with a link to that waiver. And in return, as questions and communication, as these businesses are having questions about the health orders, about COVID, about the process, we are elevating those to either the health director or the task force for answers. And we are usually able to get those responses within 24 hours or just a few days. So the task force, that is this middle tier that I am working with to help create solutions to problems, to help get information disseminated, involves an oversight hub, which includes myself and David and one of our county commissioners, as well as federal, state, regional, county, municipal, private, and utility, either influencers or people who have expertise in those areas. Region 10 has been an excellent partner in this. Nancy Murphy and Michelle Hayes they both have worked very closely with us on this task force. So a website was created 2 weeks into this by some volunteers at the ICE Lab. This was a new platform. It has a business resource tab and a community resource tab. And this has been evolving over the last few weeks, but it is really becoming fine-tuned. And I would really encourage all of you, if you're curious about what we're doing, to visit these websites. Each subgroup also has their own page, and you'll see this is what's organizing the businesses. The meeting link is shared. We have all the video, all the meetings recorded. And so people are using this. If they can't make the video or the meeting live, they're watching them after the fact. We are updating meeting minutes. Any questions that the subgroup might have for the task force or the health director are being recorded, and those are for public viewing. This new initiative that is starting right now is we are working to create reopen documents for every industry. And that is the industry and the business owners themselves thinking about how can they reopen their doors and step out of this, as Anne said, dimly, and stay safe. And what protocols and procedures, what safety, what cleaning, how are they going to do that? We are a small community, and the amount of pressure and knowledge that our health director has had to have to do what she's done for this county is incredible. But to expect her to understand lodging practices, restaurant practices, that's asking a whole lot of just a few people. So what we're doing is we're asking the businesses to create these reopen documents, and we are going to send them to the health director and to the emergency command that is going to start putting the policies in place for reopening. And it's going to be a bottom-up discussion. Joni Reynolds has really encouraged this, and what's exciting is just today, she has reached out to the leader of the early childhood care group and said, early childhood care is one of our first priorities in getting that open. Can you please have your reopen document to me by tomorrow morning? So after this call, that's what I'm going to be helping that subgroup prepare. And that's everything from, do childhood care, do the teachers wear masks? Do we screen students as they come in the door for a fever? Those details are what are going to be presented to the health director, who can help, who then can approve or provide feedback on how we reopen. And so instead of, it's helping the businesses feel as if they have some control and power and say in how we move forward. And I think the last thing, sorry, it's not moving. Oops, sorry. All right, so what has all this infrastructure done? I think most importantly, it has begun to build consensus. I mean, people were angry at first. How can you tell me to close my business for 2 weeks? We have been able to diffuse emotions and build consensus through the leadership of every leader in each subgroup. The leaders that have emerged from this process have been heroes. They have taken their peers who were very angry and helped them accept reality. And that is also really important. Is never before in my life have I recognized how important the truth is. To give people false hope that their business may open in 2 weeks does no one any good. It doesn't help the businesses plan and prepare and become creative to move forward, and it only makes them more angry. So we have had to have these hard discussions and help explain the realities of COVID and why it's so important. So education across these businesses has really been instrumental in people becoming creative and then looking forward. And the last thing that I think is really important that this is beginning to do is we're starting to form a common language. I mean, we hear all these different things on, there's so much, we're in an information overload right now, but we're trying to create common language across our community. So for example, we're using for our planning phases, Governor Polis's terms for the urgent phase, the stabilizing phase, and the recovery phase. And as we're planning, we're using that across all industry subgroups so that we know what phase we're in across the board, and we can start using common language so we all can be on the same page. And so thank you. I hope I didn't talk too much, but that's all I have. And please feel free to reach out to me if anybody has questions.
Thank you, Darcy. We're going to turn it over to Sarah for a Q&A time.
Great. Well, thank you to all of the speakers. You've really provided some beacons of light for us to all aspire to. Kind of to kick us off, I'd love to understand a little bit more about how you're prioritizing which services and programs you'll be reducing, as well as what, Darcy used an example of the early childhood care. How are you kind of going through the thought process of which services and programs you're going to prioritize to get reopened?
That is not necessarily my decision or our decision in terms of the businesses don't get to necessarily decide that. Those decisions are being made by one, the health director, by two, a group of people that are trying to recognize where the greatest risks are. Where do we need to come back as early as possible? Whether that is for health, number one, and secondly for the economy. And they're both equally important. But we were struggling in providing early childhood care prior to COVID. We didn't have enough childhood care providers. We're at risk of losing them. They're having to leave the valley. Also, parents who are having to work and they're finding family situations very challenging and difficult. So that decision was not made by me or these subgroups. That was directed from the health director.
Anne Morgenthaler, how are you all in Montrose kind of making some of these prioritization decisions? It seems like you've had a really good, strong push to keep as many businesses open and to promote businesses when and where you can. How do you look forward towards reopening? Are you guys doing similar plans to what Darcy mentioned?
Hi, yeah, that's a great question. So what is similar is that it's not really up to us. So the governor's order has dictated what businesses are critical and which ones are not, and which ones can stay open. And it has been terrible to contact businesses and tell them that they have to close in order to comply with the governor's order. But I think our plan is just to continue to communicate with businesses. I love, Darcy, the structure that you all have, and it's something that we can really learn from over here. But in order to have that consensus about how things move forward, as an example, I know there's a team of golf pros in town, and they're already planning for what they want to propose as a way to safely operate as we hopefully transition back to being more fully open for operations. And I know that other industries are talking about that, though not as formal as over in Gunnison County. Regarding prioritizing city services, we're using our reserves. So we are fortunate enough to, over the years, since the recession, have built up healthy reserves in our municipal government, and we're planning on using them. This is our rainy day. And so we are not going to be cutting full-time or part-time continuous staff members, but we're likely not hiring seasonals. So this summer, so that will change the services that we're able to offer, but we're using a type of recession planning process to determine what's essential and what's maybe less essential. And as I mentioned, just shifting resources accordingly. This still feels new, and so we're continuing to talk about it every day. As we learn more information, things just continue to change.
Great. One of the questions that came through the questions box has to do with an individual who is self-employed, and they're just curious about any practices that municipalities are considering to incentivize supporting local businesses, local consultants, and things like that. All right, it sounds like that might be something to consider if this continues. A little bit more of a specific question that's come through has to do with inspections. And I know you mentioned that some of the state level inspections had been held off due to some miscommunication. Can you talk a little bit about how you're approaching on-site inspections and whether you're instituting any social distancing protocols or just, I know some communities are using kind of video and photos.
Sure, yes. We are continuing on-site inspections on that website that I included on this slide, cityofmontrose.org/COVID-19. There's a tab you can go to for our building division, and it lists the information that we shared with contractors about encouraging them to not be doing non-essential construction projects right now. For example, we've been encouraging people to please don't submit a new building permit for a new kitchen remodel, for example. We haven't received many of those things, but we still are having to inspect some projects on the inside of buildings where people are occupying those buildings. And we've been using video and photo as much as possible in those instances so that our inspectors don't go inside an occupied building. For unoccupied interior inspections as well as exterior inspections, we're asking that no one else be on site and our inspectors wearing PPE, glasses, gloves, mask in order to protect themselves as well as possibly, the surfaces inside should our inspector perhaps be sick and not know it. So it's a delicate environment, and we're using photo more than video. We found video is not really that helpful, but I think as we get better at it, maybe it would be. And then the exterior inspections are just proceeding per normal. Our inspector shows up and asks that no one else be on site and then completes the inspection.
Great. A question for Ann Miller. You mentioned the local government survey that DOLA is doing. When will the results of that be available?
Yeah, so they're working on the report right now. The survey closed last Friday, and we are expecting at the end of the day tomorrow that the survey report will be completed. And we will share it on the DOLA website and with the membership groups that were partners with us on that as CML, CCI, and SDA, Special District Association.
Great. So I'll kind of wrap up with a final question, and it's a little bit of a two-parter. For those of you who are municipal planners/administrators, how is your community looking within your own budget to either reduce or cut back projects that were proposed for 2020? And a follow-up to that is, how far out are you planning for? And yeah, I guess we'll put that out for Ann and Darcy.
Sure, this is Ann Morgenthaler, and I'll start and say it's an ongoing process. But I mentioned that we had some marketing money that we planned to use for tourism, and we've reprioritized that. Similarly, we've got some funding that we'd plan to use for community events. And with people not gathering at all right now and likely gathering much less throughout the summer, we're starting to think about using that funding differently, though we haven't exactly decided how. Something we're doing with staff members is we just hired a competitive sports coordinator to help us with our competitive baseball season and run that. And we've decided to cancel the competitive baseball season, or at least it'll be very, very different if it occurs at all later in the summer. And so we have that staff member who has now the capacity to do different work. So we are going to be allocating his time differently, and we're still working through that plan. But the same thing is happening over in our streets department and also in our parks department. I think we'll be shifting the way that people work and the jobs that they do in order to make sure that we're providing the essential services. And since we're not going to be able to have our seasonals come on board. So that's just some ways internally that things are changing for us. And I anticipate that we will be shifting throughout the rest of the year in that way to see which projects, as they come up, really consider, are we going to do this year or not? We had a wayfinding project as another example. We had budgeted $100,000 to complete our wayfinding plan, and our council decided we're not going to do that this year, at least not right now. If things pick up later in the year, then maybe we would, but that's one big cut that we've already made.
And I'll just,
Thanks for sharing that insight. Yeah.
do you want me to respond to that too? Do we have time, or I think Ann did a great job?
Yeah, we have about 1 minute if you want to add anything.
Sure, I'll just mention that we haven't had as rapid of a response from our city, municipalities, and the county, and that's not because we aren't planning or they aren't planning to help. It's because we don't have the same financial ability to do as much financially. So we want to make sure every dollar counts and it's put to the most greatest return. So we've been waiting to watch how these federal programs roll out. We didn't want to replicate, let's say we didn't want to relieve people or pay people to keep their employees on when the federal government may be doing that. The other thing, what we are asking in subgroups are writing letters to the Board of County Commissioners with suggestions on what would be the best help to them. Everyone understands we don't have enough money to go around, not only in our county, but in our state and in our country. So we're pushing the businesses not to just say, hey, turn off the permit fees so we can incentivize people to keep building. Is a permit fee going to really turn the tide to get somebody to go ahead and move forward with a building project? And the answer is probably no. So what really can make a difference? And we're working with the subgroups to find what those things are. And I hope we'll have some answers soon, but we haven't rolled out any programs quite yet.
Great. Well, thank you all for your insights and your thoughts. As you've all kind of relayed throughout the course of this, it's an ever-changing time, and to the extent that we can all continue to stay flexible, I think I'm hopeful that we all get on the other side of this together. Sheila, do you have any last minute promo for the next town hall?
Well, I hope that you will join us next week. It's next Thursday, same time, same bat channel, 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And we're going to be having our Healthy Communities Committee join us and do a presentation about the impacts and how it affects community planning moving forward and the importance of planning with a healthy community in mind. And thanks, everyone. I will send out an email with a link to the recording and answers to any of our chat questions we may have had. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great day.